Well, this, of course, as always, promises to be a very interactive session, so I hope you've all brought your questions with you. I've got what could frankly be described as an all-star panel. I hope you will all agree, especially the stars. So I'm going to firstly invite John Gilliland. He has an OBE. You please, yeah. I like John because he's always succinct, erudite, charming. He's smiling now. Very focused on sustainability, farm networks. He has his own farm called Brook Hall. They are famous, or becoming famous for their goals of being beyond net zero. And he's also been very involved with policy, particularly policy in Northern Ireland on soil, sustainability, resilience, etc. So I'm going to look forward to hearing your comments on that, particularly what you do on the farm with growing willow trees. And second up, Mary McCarthy. She's the Vice Dean of Research and Innovation at the Business School and the Law School. Her interests are food health. She has written over 90 peer-reviewed papers. Hard to believe you could get through 90 papers and still an early career. Anyway.
Thank you.
Jack Bobo, insightful, dynamic, forceful. Jack, do any of those words you disagree with? And 500 keynote speeches. Originally started with the US State Department, was very involved with trade issues. And finally, we need our token farmer, Karol Kissane. He's the head of public sector services and economics. He's also a farmer from Kerry. And he's a Nuffield scholar. He works with the IFA, that's the Irish Farmers Association, as a senior policy advisor. So we are going to have what I think should be a very dynamic conversation. But to be clear, I'm going to stop fairly early on, and I expect that you will all have questions for the panel. If I could start off maybe by, maybe this is the audience participation part. So who do you think should be demanding change in the food system? Do you think that should be consumers? Do you think it should be the government? Do you think it should be internal organizations, or should it be the food industry itself? So going to start, who thinks consumers are the ones who should be demanding change in the food industry? Please, show of hands. Okay, I have 2, 3, 4, oh, more than that. Okay, good. Who thinks it should be done by the government? Only one?
A couple half hands.
A couple more. International organizations, FAO, for example, we just heard of, and food industry. There seem to be a number of non-voters. Usually my problem is the opposite. Usually I get people voting 3-4 ways. It feels like you are in Kilkenny when you see people voting several times. Anyway, let's move through to my panel. Feels to me as though the consumer has taken a role, John, that's even more demanding perhaps than the governments are, than international organizations are, than the food industry is. Is that fair?
I don't think it's fair. I mean, people say that to me. I come from livestock sector. We are the pariahs in the eyes of many people. Yet, what we're seeing is consumption for our products going up. We're not seeing them going down. The one grouping you didn't mention in your intro for me are farmers themselves. I am a farmer, and I've been on a journey for 20 years for one reason, is I want the proper story told about what I do as a farmer and what my peers do as a farmer. And I find this debate very one-sided. And certainly, we've just come off, every year we do what we call Open Farm Weekend. So we open up the gates of our farm. We had 1,000 lay people through our gates on Saturday and Sunday because we have nothing to hide. We want to tell our story. But what people forget is my landscape of ruminant animals. It's full of plants that photosynthesize and take carbon out of the sky. They just don't belch. And we're changing the narrative. But I'm doing that. I'm creating change because I want my story told properly. And it isn't told properly at the moment.
Karol, you're a farmer. What, do you agree with that, or?
Yes. in one word, but I'll try and expand. So yeah, I would totally agree with what John is saying there, like that, and even referring back to this morning when Tara was speaking from her Borbia days, and now with Altec, and that is the telling of the story, that it's not a yes, no, a good, bad. Like when you look at primary production, you look at agriculture, and especially animal agriculture, there's so many interdependencies there, there's so many complications that no matter what question you look at answering, it is not a yes, no question or yes, no answer to it. There's just so much happening there, and it's so important. Like when the title of this here is looking at trust, and we would do a lot of kind of survey work and looking at different things like that within ifac when we were preparing reports and that, and even looking at international studies. And when you're talking about food, probably I would say the main place that consumers put trust is on the farmer, that primary producer. And I know everybody else here in the room, if you're in the industry, you're almost trying to work off the back of that to sell what you have, and showing this is where the trust came from. It came from within that farm gate. So trying to marry that up and have a return for a farmer is actually hard work, and have something for everybody within the system. But it's complicated, but I would definitely think, yeah, the farmer is important within this.
Mary, government, food industry, international organizations, consumer, farmer.
Well, I actually agree with the principle around the farmer being an important part of that ecosystem and that landscape, because ultimately, from a consumer perspective, we use a set of mental shortcuts to evaluate products, to trust products, and to choose our products. And we've seen in many, many occasions, the farmer is rolled up as evidence of transparency and trust across the supply chain, communicating a guarantee of certain standards. So therefore, the farmer story needs to be told properly, and it needs to be stood up, and that's why we need good traceability within the system as well. And it recognises the role that each is playing appropriately. So as we use our shortcuts to make our decisions in the shop, and we do, like we're not going to spend all day deciding whether we're buying product A or product B. It's brand A, this is the story that we've been told about it, we believe it's delivering on that, that's it, we're taking it home, and we're seeing these images in our minds as we're consuming it.
Jack, it's often said that when somebody, food company, I saw this, I said, well, do you have consumer trust? And he said, yes, we've got a QR code, and look at this report. And I see this big 10-page, 20-page report, like that's going to, does that work?
Well, I think if people don't trust you, they don't want to see your QR code. And if they do trust you, they don't need to see your QR code. Okay. And so I think we're missing the point about trust and how it actually works. But I want to just briefly get back to your question about like who decides. And I think it doesn't really matter who we want to decide. All of those players have a role in the decisions. Consumers think they're making choices, but the choices you make are limited by what's in front of you. And government has a big role in that, determining whether or not innovations make it to the shelves. And food companies have a role, whether we like it or not, in determining that. And I think part of what's missing is a conversation about what we want our food system to look like so that we can engage with all of those stakeholders in order to deliver that system.
Mm-hmm. John, we seem to rely a lot on data and presume that so long as we're providing lots of information, the consumer will assume that we are honest. Is that a right approach?
I mean, for me, everyone, everywhere I go in the food chain, people talk to me about data. But, if you don't have a story to tell, data's irrelevant. And so my role that I've played certainly the last 10 years is helping us get the story right, using the right measuring, reporting, and verification to which we generate the data from, okay? If you don't have data coming from the right measurement, you don't get the right answer, okay? A lot of times then I spend with my peers, why as a farmer should I let my data flow up the food chain? It's one of the biggest challenges sitting out there. Now, in the role that I play where I measure, report, and verify what goes on farms, I will always say the first customer for that data is the farmer themselves. And people forget about that because actually what I want to do as a farmer, I want to be a better farmer. I'm also a 5th generation farmer, and I want the 6th generation to get a better asset than I inherited. So those are the engines that are making me tick. So when I do data, the first customer of the data is me personally. The second customer is for my consumer and for the public, okay? And in between that, then the supply chain fits within. The pressure coming on me at the moment is from not from consumers. It's coming from the Greenhouse Gas Protocol. It's coming from Scope 3 declarations. They've now launched the land sector removal standards. They're the ones who are driving the data, but they haven't educated farmers. Why? What's in it for them? And why should there be trust in letting primary data flow off farms? So data is fundamental, but we have to look at the key, what are we measuring, and why we're measuring, and what is in it to the farmer who actually has to do the heavy lifting of 80, 90% of the data provision.
Yeah, but I'm not going to let you away with that now. Wait a second. Aren't you the man who changed Northern Irish policy using data?
Yeah.
So
well,
you use the data, you inform the government.
But I use the data in a key principle. And that principle is if you cannot measure, you cannot manage. Okay? And then you need to go and measure again. So I had the privilege of chairing the writing of the Sustainable Land Management Strategy in Northern Ireland. And threaded right through that is every farm needs to be measured. The soil needs to be measured. The trees need to be measured. Once you do that, and if you repeat that every 5 years, you measure change. Then you've got a journey to which you build your story on, and that's where you give transparency and integrity. And that's when you really win the hearts and minds of consumers, NGOs, governments. And it's how you do that, because at the moment, so much of the noise is subjective and emotional and not objective and rational. And we need to dial down it, particularly in animal agriculture and ruminants where I come from. It is absolutely fundamental that we're objective and we have sound data to build our narratives around. And we haven't up until now. The conclusion, yes, we secured £38 million. Northern Ireland is the only place that we've done soil sampling in every single field, LiDAR in every tree and hedge, put it all together, given farmers training, and now we're on a journey of change. But we've got a baseline, a really accurate baseline that we will go back and remeasure every 5 years, and then we can tell our story.
Karol, you're both a farmer, but you worked for the Farmers Association. Do you imagine farmers buying into the idea of sharing their data in that way in order to create?
That's that point when you mentioned it earlier, I had to laugh, and probably everybody in the room was laughing as well. Like when you talk about farmers and data, and me being a farmer myself, all our data is worth millions to us. And you guys are running around making huge amounts of money out of it. No, we know in reality it's not. But farmers and data is an area that gets very touchy with most farmers. They don't want to share. They believe it's worth something. Everybody's making something off it. But I'd come back almost to maybe what John mentioned there. It's to get the farmer on board, to get him or her bought in, at the end of the day, it's show me the money. It's like, where's the value there? And that if we're trying to build trust and we need to verify it, and if there's a cost there in that, the cost probably does come back on the farmer, and if there's not a return to show that it's worth my while to actually do this, how would you bring him on the journey? Again, otherwise we're just seen as further regulation, further red tape, further things I've got to do, but what's it worth to me?
But it does assume that the benefit of the data is for somebody else. I will argue, what we have found in the soil nutrient health scheme, very basic, our soil pH is awful.
Yes.
The very basic for building grass productivity in Ireland is soil pH, okay? For 40 years, we haven't been put enough lime. So the very first output of this data, this measurement and this data output, actually, I'm the benefit of it. I'm now taking my pH up to 6.5. Jaggers has been saying that for years, okay? We haven't been doing it. Okay. So I think it's really important when we go on this exercise, and I am a farmer, I'm a past president of the Farmers Union in the North, and I understand, I work with my peers all the time, we do need to put this and phrase this conversation and what's the value to them. It may not be in a cent per litre of milk, but it may be I take costs out of my business and I'm more productive.
And can I ask the question, sorry for coming in straight away,
You're going to disagree with them as well?
No, I'm actually not going to disagree. I'm totally going to agree with you. And I see the value myself from doing what you're talking about there, especially basics like your pH or whatever like that. But it's just that fear is, and maybe you were going to tell me you've got a solution to this, that we go 10 years down the line, farmers have now, say, corrected their pHs because of the data you've given them. They are producing more grass. They are making more money off the back of that. But they're still looking at say what you've rolled out, kind of going, that's just a cost to me. I'm not getting an extra cent per litre from my milk. Are you quantifying or tracking some kind of a way of quantifying that benefit that you're going to get, like beyond what you're looking at here?
Listen, we're on a journey. For me, the number one customer is myself. I want to make my farm more resilient. If I'm more resilient, okay, I am a financially better heart to have a conversation with the supply chain. But I've now got a narrative, and I can tell my narrative. And I believe I can place that in the marketplace because my competitors don't have the same granularity or integrity in their narrative.
Jack, help me out here. Now, my mother used to use the phrase, don't cut a stick to beat yourself with. Radical transparency in our food chain, it's a disaster, isn't it? I mean, basically, we're telling people what we do, and then they start asking us more and more questions. How do we get off this merry-go-round?
Yeah, I think there are two different concepts for the radical transparency. On one hand, you have consumers saying that they want this transparency, and then you have companies that just try to dump data on the consumer. And I think that's a misunderstanding of what the consumer wants. When the consumer says they want transparency, it's a value, it's a feeling that they want to feel good about where things come from. You can't fill a trust gap with data. And more data is just not going to answer that question because that's not really ultimately what it comes down to. And I think that's part of the problem we have is that we're misunderstanding what each side is talking about. And part of the challenge, I think, is that consumers have never cared more nor known less how food is produced. And because they care, they're asking for stuff, but because they don't understand what it means, the implications of it, what they're given may not fulfill that need. And I just want to give one example. McDonald's years ago, the marketing team said that we want to put all of our ingredients online. And it was going to be a lot of work, and they just didn't really want to do it. Finally, the company buckled down, and they put it up on a website, and nobody visited the website. And the people came out, they're like kind of angry. It's like, this was a lot of work, and why did we do it? And the marketing guys are like, yeah, that's the point. It's available. Nobody cares. And so sometimes having something of that transparency doesn't mean people want it. They just feel better that it exists. And so, again, we kind of misunderstand the value of the things that we're doing.
Mary, you've studied this area a lot, clearly. Overwhelmed consumer.
Yeah, I think the points have already been made. It's how you present the information, how you present the data. So raw data, that's just abdicating responsibility within the supply chain. If you're going to come along and you just dump data on individuals, they don't understand it, they don't have the time, they don't want to understand it. It's making bite-sized pieces of information available, designed in accessible ways when and where the customer wants it. So again, we heard already the idea of the QR code. If it's there, I'm happy it's there. It tells me something. They're not hiding. If I'm sitting at home at my breakfast table and I go, scan it, and suddenly I say, oh, this product came from here. Or, oh, your face pops up. Wonderful. So we're in that space where it's just that reassurance. We're standing up the story of our brand. We're standing up that trusting relationship. And then there's more data behind standing up the pieces of evidence that we're witnessing in bite-sized pieces when and where we want it. We're saying we're not hiding anything. We're telling the story, but we're telling it in a way that, as you say, the customer doesn't understand the basis of what your data is gathering at farm level. They kind of want that reassurance that evidence is there. Some of them, some of the time.
Karol, I heard about 10 years ago for the first time about blockchain. And I presume that was our savior. And then I heard about all these certification systems and that you have to fill out and then consume. Those haven't quite done it, have they?
That's a good question. If you were talking to a farmer, they probably would say no. Again, back, where is the return that's come from this? No. On the other side of the equation, you talking in this room, or you look at it more generally, you're kind of saying, no, it has done it. We look at what Origin Green, we look at what Bobo has done for us here in Ireland. We can have the argument every day of the week. It's not seen like I got my milk check this morning. I didn't see 1 cent or 1.5 cents because I'm Bobo, but it's opening up those markets. It's getting us into those equations. It's getting us into in front of buyers we want to be. It gets us into those premium markets. So it is doing it. It's probably doing it slower and in a less kind of visual way than probably those in primary agriculture and farmers would want to see, but I think it's critical. I can imagine if tomorrow morning someone decided, okay, in Ireland, we're dropping Origin Green, what would happen to the food companies here that are Irish, let's say, that are exporting from Ireland? What markets would be open? What questions would they have to answer? That we're on that journey now. That journey is successful, I would say. It is returning, maybe not as quantifiable as you'd like to see as a farmer, but it is doing for us, and I think we definitely have to continue on in it.
John, I'd have to ask you to just explain for a second, because you've got a foot, you're on the island of Ireland. For those audience members who don't understand this, you're in the United Kingdom, but you're also
Just.
on the island, so certification systems must be a nightmare. Do you see the value in them?
Well, just to set the record, I am 1 kilometre from the European Union. So you can understand what I felt when
Have
the UK...
you thought about moving the border, or what?
Well, so I mean, I watched both, and Northern Ireland is unique in regards for phytosanitary and biosecurity. It is in the European Union, but for everything else, it's in the United Kingdom, okay? So we have this extra problem. We have now an Irish sea border, which then becomes politically very passionate and emotional and whatever. But yes, we do have issues around certification, but I would argue that actually we have to look beyond that. You know, we're sitting today in 2026 within the European Union. We've now gone live. The European Commission have now gone live with the carbon removal certification framework, okay? The one big landscape out there that can do the heavy lifting on this journey is actually the food-producing landscape. Everyone talks about forests and they talk about peats, but they don't talk about the food-producing landscape. For the first time, the European Commission has now accepted that the food-producing landscape have a role to play. Now, you mentioned blockchain a moment ago, okay? Where blockchain, for me, will have a role to play is not necessarily in food labeling to the customer, but will be in carbon labeling to the carbon market.
Okay.
And I think, you know, so it's not that these technologies won't have a role. They will have a role, but it'll be for specific markets where you can put a GIS tag, is that carbon credit has come from that hectare there, and that is blockchained into that carbon certificate. So I do think that technology still has a very large role to play. But I do believe the last thing I want to do is sit at breakfast and go and reach for my QR code. You know, 99% of consumers aren't doing that.
Jack, sustainability. We've read a lot about it. We believe consumers want it, and yet we've got Aldi, Lidl, exploding in the Irish market, the UK market, now these types of multiples arriving in the US. People still buy on price, don't they?
Well, most consumers won't change what they eat to save their lives. Why do we think they'll change what they eat to save the planet? So it's a little bit painful. That doesn't mean we don't need to do it, but we can't necessarily expect the consumer to pay for it in that way. And so I think, you know, we just have to have a reality check in terms of how people make purchases. But I also think we sometimes forget that the reason people buy things and the story they tell about why they buy things can be different. So they may buy on price, but then if the product still has a good story behind it, they'll still tell that story. And they'll say, oh, I bought it because, you know, it comes from John's farm, even though they made a decision. And so I think that creates an environment in which sustainability and other things can have a role. I think I would go back to what Mary said yesterday, though, in terms of, I think the conversation around sustainability is kind of had its time. And if I was being provocative, I'd say sustainability is dead. And what I mean by that is sustainability is a cost, and the first thing that gets cut in tough times are costs. And I think we should be talking about resilience, because resilience is like insurance. It's an investment in the future of a business, and it comes from a different line. And you know, there's a budget for insurance. There's just not one for these costs. And I think that, and the last point I would just make is that, you know, we've been optimizing for efficiency for all of sort of business history, but efficiency in a disruptive world is fragility. And in a fragile world, you have to optimize for resilience. And so I think the conversation about sustainability is going to take a dramatic turn, and I think we're at an inflection point.
Mary, yes, Sir John, did you want to?
No, I mean, I agree with Jack. I mean,
you agree with him?
Yeah, I do agree with Jack. Because I think sustainability is completely overplayed. But I do think resilience. I mean, I've just finished, I've done one-to-one training on 18 farms in England over the last couple of weeks. And the key question was about resilience. And the two key pressure points is access to fertilizer and price in the next 6 months. How on earth am I going to get through that? And the second one, weather extremes.
Yeah.
How do I make my landscape resilient to either floods or drought? Because gone are the lovely seasons we used to have. And so certainly when I speak with my peers, resilience is the word that lights fires, is how do I reduce this volatility that I'm suddenly exposed to that I can't handle? It's out of my control. What is in my control, what's within my farm gate? So certainly on the nitrogen side, how do I sweat legumes in my soil better? On the climate side, how do I make my soil, both hold water more and let water away quickly? Those are the conversations, and those are what are really lighting fires with farmers at the moment, is how do they build their business more resilient to these collection of volatilities that are beating them up at the moment.
Yeah, and there's a lot. Mary, I don't know if you're conducting social experiments on the campus, but I suspect you were. Yesterday I went to the coffee shop, and there were 2 Kit Kats on the shelf. One that said it was doing better for the farmers in Africa, and the other one which was cheaper. And I think I was supposed to decide in real time which, and I don't know whether you're doing this with all the students on the campus, but it'd be interesting to know which Kit Kat sells more.
Well, I'm not aware of that, but I do recall anecdotally many years ago, and it probably still continues on in retail stores, where you have the fair trade bananas next to the cheap bananas. And what you would witness happening for people who were kind of had this moral and ethical motivation, they'd buy half of bananas fair trade and half of the others. So they were negotiating themselves, and it's that type of trade-off that we're talking about.
So they were sustainable light.
They were doing what they could do within the constraints of their budgets. And it goes to the point that a consumer doesn't concern themselves with just one thing. Yeah. They concern themselves with multiple things. They're trying to feed a family, they want a healthy diet, they want their kids to eat the food they present in front of them, and they only have a set budget. And they have no time available to do any of this. So they're looking for reasonably priced, more guilt-free products, I would say. Guilt is part of the process. So they're looking for little indicators of where that is. So if the 2 Kit Kats were the same price and the fair trade was on one, that's the one that would have been picked. And that's an important point to remember when we think about price. We are sensitive to price. And it goes to one of my biggest issues, I suppose, with the whole food system. We somehow have created a system where people think food should be cheap. And if there's one thing we could reset, if we could reset that mindset and recognize the true cost of what you're talking about with regard to climate resilience, the climate cost, that would be fantastic. I think that boat has sailed. So now the conversations are around the issues like, I would put farm resilience into the sustainability bucket. I suppose in many respects, and it's a conversation at the farm side, is food security and availability and price.
My issue isn't that sustainability dead, it's the lever. What wins hearts and minds. Sustainability winning hearts and minds is gone. I think resilience winning hearts and minds, certainly for my peers, is what's lighting their fires at the moment and being a lever for change.
But I suppose if we actually look at Euromonitor reports, they're still saying 50% of customers are concerned about the environment and sustainability, and they're looking for easy solutions. Or actually, no, sorry, over 70%. 50% think they can do something. Yeah. So it is still in the ecosystem. It's a question of how that translates into meaningful, context-specific applications.
Absolutely.
I'm going to, because we did start a few minutes late, questions from the audience, please. Yes.
The young man here in the middle in the white jacket.
Kerry group. The microphone's just arrived, one beside you, the other side.
I'll ask Jack.
Uh-oh.
So when you say sustainability is dead, are we talking about the communication concept? Or are we talking about the reality of what sustainability does? Because at the core of what the definition is, it's output versus input. Mm-hmm. And so it's doing the same with less. So it's never more expensive. Define cost, because if you talk cash cost, that's fine. If you talk about return on investment, I can give you reams of business cases where we need to kill that narrative that sustainability costs money.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So to all the chief sustainability officers in the room.
They're quite, by the way, there's more than one.
Yeah, I know.
If you treat sustainability as a cost, it will be a cost.
Yeah.
I'm the head of marketing and business as well as sustainability. And the reason we brought that there, because if you look at it as an investment, it has a fantastic return.
Yeah.
So I couldn't not react, my dear Jack, to your
All right.
statement.
Jack.
Your provocation.
Yeah.
Jack.
Yeah, and I did it as a provocation, and I think the problem is that for too many CEOs, they view sustainability as a cost, and they're trying to squeeze you when times get tough. And really what I'm trying to offer is a different narrative that I think is absolutely consistent with what you're saying.
It's a narrative.
Yeah. And, you know, I had this conversation with the chief sustainability officer of one of the largest food companies in the world, and his view was, I'm going to steal that, because he wanted a story to be able to tell about resilience that a CEO is going to respond to. And it's really, I think we've had too many separate conversations where the sustainability has just not been an opportunity that CEOs look to when times were tough. It was a pressure point when times are tough. And so I think that this new narrative around resilience creates a new opportunity for that narrative or that conversation.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Other questions? My God, I've never seen Tara and Mary look so quiet.
Aidan.
Here we go. Sylvan, good, thank you.
Since Mary is quiet, I'll talk.
This man single-handedly has been fighting battles in Canada on social media so anyway.
Thank you.
Professor,
Thank you for noting.
Professors, explain to
Sylvain
me.
Charlebois from Canada. Great conversation. My concern about consumer trust is that everything gets politicized now out there. And we all know that consumers are very affected, influenced by noise. Lots of noise out there, whether it's on social media, politicians, and so on and so forth. So my question to the panel is, how does the industry get ahead of that? Of the noise that tends to really change perceptions on sustainability, for example, or inflation, or anything else that's impacting industry. So how do we get ahead of that?
I can see they all want that one. How does the industry get ahead of it?
I mean, I'm happy to comment, but I think industry hasn't done a great job of communicating to the public with the values that the public actually cares about. We tend to speak within our own community, and most companies think in terms of science solves problems. But when it comes to the sustainability, it's about reducing the impact on the planet, and so we're using different language. And you know, you talk to a company and they say, we reduced our impact or our emissions by 20% per unit produced. Isn't that amazing? And then a conservation group says, sure, but your emissions went up by 5%. You're destroying the planet in a more efficient way. And that mismatch of what's happening leads to some of that distrust and claims of greenwashing and other things. And I think industry needs to understand where the public is coming from and not try to convince the public to understand their point of view. They need to understand the public's point of view and be able to communicate in ways that resonate with the people whose opinions matter. And I don't think they're doing a very good job of it right now.
Okay, other questions?
Got it.
Yeah.
Tara is ready. I think once I called her name, she said, oh, you shamed me into this.
Again, I'm going to build on that conversation on the idea that the industry isn't engaging with the consumer. When I would kind of build on the previous comment, Jack, that you mentioned on the consumer has never known less. So most of the narrative isn't a consumer narrative, I'd argue. It's a lobby narrative from those who may have anti-agriculture's license to operate in the first place perspectives. So the question I'm asking here is consumer trust. Is it consumer trust or is it society trust? And then what's the job to be done in society trust? Because I'd argue when you lose trust, you're regulated. So that's the crossroads I think that the industry is sitting at. So when you're leaning into societal trust, who are the stakeholders and how could we do better with them?
Can we switch it around a bit? Mary, would you mind?
Yeah, I think that's a very valid point, because I suppose many of the issues are actually at a social level and a societal level. And we talk about the citizen versus the consumer, and we have to actually deal with the citizen first in the context of this. So it's a very insightful way of looking at it, because we try to knit the two of those together and communicate it through a product. We have to have those understandings already of what this is about, what it really means as a society, and frame what is acceptable and unacceptable to us, going back to societal values, before we can actually build out the product story as well, because it's set within a context. We understand things based on what we already understand. We place meaning on things based on the way we already have meanings around these. So you find that a response to the same communication in two different countries results in a different outcome. That's got to do with that societal piece you're talking about and those narratives, how we have constructed meanings as a society, how we've engaged with that society. So yeah, absolutely, I would fully agree with you.
Karol.
Can I come in almost with maybe a question myself, and maybe a comment on that as well, kind of thing, that we're talking here, we'll say, on huge subjects of trust and societal trust, or what way we look at things. But back to what you said earlier there, Mary, like that, if we think about the society we live in right now, it's noise everywhere. Everything is so busy. And when you go to buy something, like, you're making that decision probably based on what you bought last week and that. So you have that inbuilt trust on a product, and you don't want to lose the trust almost, I think is the thing. Like, so is it, especially for existing products, is it more about that we're trying to get too many stories out there, but it's more about maybe dial it back a little bit, and that you have it, that you make sure that the trust is built on something that's concrete, that's solid. So again, back to the point, if the question is asked, there's something there behind it, but it doesn't need to be pushed out the whole time, let's say, because people are just so busy out there, what's true, what's not. Everything is up for grabs at the moment.
I'd agree with you 100%. You need to keep the story simple. You have a brand, you're communicating that you're competent in what you're doing, your intent is right, that you have your consumer and society in mind in what you're doing, and if something goes wrong, you have integrity about how you respond. They're the three pillars upon which you build trust anyway. The more you create stories, the more you're actually potentially diluting the core story. But if a question is asked, you have to have the answer. You have to have an answer in a way that it's understood. So it takes care of some of that noise. So it's how you respond and can stand up that response is how I would see it. And that's why all that data is wonderful to have, going back to your point with regard to value.
No, go for it.
No, my success as a policy advocate, because I hear, Aidan, what you're saying about consumer. The two pressure points coming me and the primary producer, one is coming from government and one is coming from the food chain. It is not necessarily coming with the consumer. I make it my business to open my farm every year to society. I had 1,000 members of society on my farm last weekend looking at what I was doing, okay? It's a real good sounding board, so that when I'm on my advocate work and I hear people saying to me, well, that's very interesting, but can I show you the results of the group of society were on my farm last week? And their face strains down, and it's quite helpful to ground truth this and actually. So the best thing for me has always been, let society come onto our farms.
So we can imagine you as the next Clarkson's farm, can we?
Well, listen, love him or loathe him. He has completely transformed where agriculture sits in the English mindset.
And globally, he's had a big impact in the US as well.
You know, so love him or loathe him. But it is this issue. We are so now, as a primary producer, so remote from the customer. And it's really important that we find ways to reconnect that. And, certainly, I come away very humbled. This is the third year in a row we have done this. We've had remarkable feedback, but it makes me more pertinent when I'm a policy advocate, both into governments and into the supply chain, saying, hold on a moment, are consumers actually saying that? The one thing that strikes out, the BBC wrote an article on my own farm 2 years ago, and it was titled Guilt-Free Meat. And I use that quite a lot because actually it pulls and tugs on people's conscience. And it was quite something for the BBC to actually stick that on an article about my own farm, guilt-free meat. And it goes to this issue. It's, what tugs and strings. People don't want to see the data, but they want to have that trust. And it has a value that they absolutely understand.
Okay, I'll take merit.
I don't think regulation can fix trust. And regulation's good at risk. Hazard times exposure equals risk. Regulators understand that. But what we're talking about is hazard times media exposure equals perception of risk. And regulation's not going to deal with perception of risk.
Great. Mary, you said, keep it simple. 5 words for everybody, because we are concluding now this conference, this part of the conference, and there's going to be lots of time afterwards. 5 words, John, to summarize what you told us.
Passion, transparency, integrity.
We're good. I mean, you can do
Okay,
less than
I'll
5.
stop with 3.
Top of 3.
I was
Mary.
going to do a sentence. Trust is hard earned and easily lost.
Oh, very
Is that
good.
5?
Okay.
Is that-
Yeah.
I might have gone over.
We need to address narrative risk, not actual risk.
That sounds like more than 5, Jack.
Narrative.
Just being factual here.
I lent him a
Narrative
couple of mine.
Just being factual.
That's right.
All right, Carol.
I'm
On
borrowing a
average.
few of John's as well. I would say that the value of trust has to pass back through the chain, otherwise it's just the cost for who's putting the data together.
If you know Kerry people, you know there was no way we're getting 5 words out of it. Anyway, thank you very much, my panel.